Hi everybody, this is Pete from Old City Press and Letterpress Inc. This is our first part series on letterpress printing for new printers. And we're just going to go over a few journal-based topics, and today's topic is on letterpress paper. So, alright, so we're going to assume you got your letterpress machine, right? Whether it be like a Kelsey press or a CP Pilot, or even like an 8x12 or 10x15 Chandler Price that you found in someone's dingy basement, right? You got it home, you got it all cleaned up, and you're like ready to go, right? A lot of this stuff still would relate to if you're using like an L letterpress machine or like a Z6, right? Something you would get from Paper Source. Some of the stuff we talk about today will still flow over to that. So, okay. What I want to go over quickly is the kind of papers, some of the more popular papers for letterpress, some of the thicknesses on those papers, and some considerations whenever you're trying to print on, a Kelsey press or a CP Pilot. Overall, just some things to kind of keep in mind. So, okay. Bigger players in the paper market would be Crane, which everybody knows about. And Crane has 110 pound and 220 pound weight papers. There's also Savoy. Savoy is very popular too. They have 118, they have 184, and they have 236. And then you have Holyoke. Holyoke's like a cool independent brand. They have some lower weights, like 110 pound, and then they gotta go like 140 pound, and then they have some crazy 270 pound thickness paper, right? Which is pretty crazy in the letterpress market. And then you have French paper, and French paper has two weights, 100 pound and 140 pound overall. The one thing with the French paper though is it's not as thick. So remember, when we say 100 pound or 140 pound weight, that's how much the paper weighs, not the actual thickness. So 118 pound Savoy will feel as thick as a 140 pound French paper. So just something to keep in mind, right? French paper is a great paper. We love it for letterpress printing, for like posters and things like that. Great paper, has a lot of flexibility to it, and it's really affordable. But that's just something to keep in mind that they are different. So, for this conversation, I'm gonna push French paper to the side for a moment, right? When you think about printing with a Kelsey press or CP Pilot, and you think about, you need to really recognize how big your base is and how much room you have to print. So this is from my 8x12. This is a 6x9 base from my 8x12 chase, right? And if you have a 5x8 Kelsey press, and that means that this is 5x8, the chase is, the actual base is going to be smaller. I think it's going to be like 4.5x7 or something, right? Don't quote me on that. Boxcar has that exact information on there, right? And if you have any questions, call them on that. But okay, so this is the surface area it's going to print, right? The more surface area you cover, the impression is not going to get as deep, right? So for instance, right, if I am printing a 5x7 on here, it covers up a lot of the base on this, right? It covers up a lot of the base. And that means that if you're using a Kelsey press or a CP Pilot and you're pushing on it, you'd have to push pretty hard to get a pretty deep impression on this, right? If you're doing something smaller, like a business card type, right? And this is the one we have got now. This is a business card type. If you're printing on this, you would see that you're going to have less surface area, or more surface area. So when you do the impression, you're going to get a thicker impression without pushing quite as hard or pulling the lever quite as hard, right? And this is the same for the L letterpress machine. All right, so to keep that in mind. Now, the one thing, the important part of this is that if you're trying to do a 5x7 invitation on your Kelsey press and you want to get a deep impression without really crushing the machine and feel like you're going to break it, and sometimes the handles do snap when you pull too hard, I would suggest go with a thinner paper, like a 118 pound or a 110 pound. Because you're going to get what's going to feel like a deeper impression, and you're not going to crush the paper. So one of the considerations is this, right? So like, see how this design, which I absolutely love, has the flow all the way through. What would happen sometimes if you're trying to do this on a Kelsey press, right, or CP Pilot, you may get uneven coverage on there, and there's some roller height and things like that, which we'll cover in another video. But generally speaking, that would be a consideration to take. If you're using a thinner paper, right, like a 118, you may get a little more even coat on it. So just something to keep in mind, right, overall with that. Now, the one thing I strongly suggest, and someone is like hammering on a horn outside of our shop here. So one thing I strongly suggest would be when you're practicing and playing with paper, use French paper, right? So French paper line has 100 pound, 140 pound, which is the thickness, which is the weight, I'm sorry, not the thickness. But the reason why is it's super cheap, in comparison to like some of the cotton papers, right? And one thing you need starting out is a lot of patience, right? And you're gonna be testing and tweaking and testing. A lot of these machines are, from the 20s and 30s and 40s, right? They're not They're very solid. They work really well, but sometimes they need some tweaking. So what I would always suggest is use French paper line to start out, right? And this is French paper. It's a little more flimsy when you really take in comparison to, like a 184 Savoy, which that was on, right? But you can test a lot of paper. You're not going to freak out about spending a lot of money on it, and you can get a lot of good impression. You can still get a really good impression on that, right? So, okay, that's something to keep in mind. If you are looking to, there is some design. Okay, so I'm a strong believer too that when you're using like a Kelsey press or a CP Pilot press, that you should consider getting paper pre-cut, right? Especially if you're going above 118 pounds. To hand cut a 184, 220, 236, or the 270, something that thick, is really, really hard to even use like a paper cutter, to use like a pull paper cutter, or to use a X-Acto knife. It's very difficult to get that and get that straight. You're going to spend a lot of time. Cutting with scissors is not going to do a very good job either. I'm sure there's someone out there that's done it, but this is just going to be quicker for you. What I would suggest then is to use the thinner paper overall. With that, and to use, if you're going to cut it, use thinner paper. But I'm a strong believer in you should consider using pre-cut paper for those machines. There are some design, we can do this in another video, but there's some quick design challenges with it. If you're doing a bleed, and a bleed means it's going off of the paper, right? Generally speaking, we'd have extra paper around, I'd have crop marks, and we'd print over, and then we're going to cut that straight. It makes it difficult to do it on this. It can be done, right? It can be done, but again, it's going to take you a lot longer to line this up. So that's a design consideration when you're starting out. If you're doing something along this lines here, it's much easier because, you can put the plate directly on the paper, right? And then line that up. So it's a little bit easier to do. Or if you're doing a border works perfectly too, right? Because you can make sure you're getting it even all the way around, and then you don't have to worry about cutting it straight. You're just going to make sure that this is straight on the plate. Put the plate in, you're gonna do some tweaking on your own to get that lined up perfectly, but when you do, you got it, and that's what's perfect about it. So just some other design considerations to do. If you're thinking about doing a greeting card, so say you want to do, those most amazing greeting cards in the world, and you want them scored and folded. We'll do another video on the bone score machine, the bone folder, and we have like a little machine we score on too, which works out pretty well. But the important thing to remember is it's hard to fold anything above 118 pounds. Even French paper at 140 pounds, very difficult to fold. What I would suggest do is, you can buy it pre-scored. It's probably the best money you're going to spend, honestly. If you're trying to make yourself a little greeting card line and you're trying to take it to a craft show to sell and you want it to look pretty perfect, I would be a big believer in going to like Holyoke Paper and buying the pre-scored paper from there. They're going to be like 30 or 40 cents a card, right? I think it's, you get pretty much bigger discount when you buy a lot. But the reason why is because the quality of the card after it's printing is going to look amazing, right? And that's half the battle. The design is one portion of it, having that card being perfectly scored, right? So whenever that customer picks it up and they look at it and they're like, oh my God, this is the most professional thing I've ever seen, but with your kind of cool indie art on it, right? That's what you're kind of going for. So that when you get to that point, that's something I would strongly suggest too, is use a pre-scored paper for that, and like Holyoke has for some of that. So, okay, well that's it really on paper. I'm just kind of go over a couple quick things with you for that. If you have any questions, feel free to email us. You can drop a comment in YouTube, right? I mean, we can do some retakes here if we need to. Or if you have any other questions or new questions for new beginners, feel free to send them over to us, and either we'll answer them to you directly or maybe we'll create a video for that too. So, all right, well, this is Pete from letterpressinc.com, and I want to thank you for your time.